Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Happy Passover. Happy Easter. Happy April Fool's Eve. Happy whatever makes you happy. So I'm going to start with a story. I'm going to take my glass. I'm going to start with a story. There were these computer scientists, computer engineers, who thought that they had finally cracked the problem of artificial intelligence and computer consciousness. And so they built their machine and they started it up, and they asked it to demonstrate that it was, in fact, conscious. And after a pause where the computer seemed to be actually considering the question, it said, "Let me tell you a story." Stories are an integral part of our consciousness. They help us to learn, they help us to remember, and they help us to understand. And that's why so many teachers use stories in their teaching. And sometimes we call these stories anecdotes, sometimes parables, and sometimes myths. There's a story about Archimedes, how one day he was in his bath, and as he sank down into his bath, he saw the water being displaced around him and got the principle of displacement. And the story is that he ran naked out of his tub into the streets of the city shouting, "Eureka! Eureka!" There's a story about Isaac Newton, how he was sitting under an apple tree, and apples were falling all around him and on him, and he got to thinking about why things fall, and that led to his understanding of the law of gravity and the laws of motion. Now, in the history of science, it really doesn't matter whether these things actually happened to Aristotle, to Archimedes, and Isaac Newton. What matters is the laws and principles that they discovered and how we can use our understanding of those laws and principles to actually use them. In a religious setting, often the stories are thought to be of paramount importance. If these things didn't happen exactly the way they're written down, then the teachings of the religion are thought to be spurious. This is thought to sometimes by religious people and by non-religious people. But in a religious science setting, we can look at stories a different way. We can ask, how do they illustrate and how do they teach the spiritual laws? So I'm going to look at a few stories. There's a story called The Myth of the Birth of the Hero. Now, when I use the word myth, I don't mean it as, oh, it's just a story, it's just made up. It's not real. The word myth means a story that has a deep psychological and emotional and spiritual meaning and significance. So when we talk about the myth of the birth of the hero, that's what we mean. And in brief, the myth of the birth of the hero goes like this. A child is born who is destined to do some heroic deed, to be some sort of a hero, and immediately is beset by some danger, some threat to his life, his or her life, and has to be protected from that threat. Now, the book of Matthew tells a story like that. The book of Exodus tells a story like that. The story of the birth of Romulus and Remus is another example, or the birth of Arthur. The baby Kal-El had to be saved from the destruction of the planet Krypton, and Luke and Leia had to be hidden from the Emperor. These stories are universal. They go on and on. Now, we could ask, which of these stories actually happened? The one about Kal-El, yes, but what about the others? Did they actually happen? We could ask that story, but it's not that question, but it's not the right question to ask. The question to ask is, what does the story mean? How does it impact us? Not did it happen long ago in a galaxy far, far away. How does it impact us? And I think that we can interpret the story this way, that within each of us, at various times in our life, there's a hero newly born who has to be protected. Protected from things that go on inside us. Protected from when we get depressed. That depression can press down that hero before it can come to life. Protected from our fears, our worries, our anxieties. Protected from simply our hesitation, our uncertainty, and waiting to do what the hero wants to do. Or protected from hopelessness, from despair. that might just crush that infant hero before it's ready to do its job. So all these are dangers to that hero. All these are threats to its survival. So instead of looking at which stories happened and which don't, we can take this as a lesson, a spiritual lesson, that there's a hero inside of us. And again, as I say, at various times in our lives, a new hero is born. And that new hero has to be protected from whatever threats are inside of us that keep it from developing. Now, there's another story that you heard a bit of from Cheryl, the Exodus from Egypt. What's going on there? The Israelites have gotten their freedom from Egypt. They're on their way out. The Pharaoh changes his mind, chases after them, and they're blocked by the Red Sea. Now, everybody's saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, except for Moses, who's actually talking to God and has a conversation with him. And God tells him, hold up your rod in your hand. And he holds up his rod in his hand all through the night. And the wind blows and does its work and divides the sea, and the people walk through to the other side. Now again, if we ask, did that really happen or not, we're not really asking a good question for us, because it's something that happened or didn't long ago. How do we internalize that story? How do we make it ours? Each of us at some time or another has, I think, felt enslaved by our thoughts, our habit of thought, our emotions, by the circumstances around us. And we freed ourselves. We've started to proceed to a new life. And then something blocks us. Something is just there that can't get around. So what do? Do we say, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God? Or do we have our conversation with God? Do we then apply the lesson, have our conversation with God, raise our arm up through the night? It's not going to take a minute. It's not going to take a second. It will take a while. And let that wind do its work. And in the ancient languages, in Hebrew, in Greek, in Latin, wind and spirit are the same word. They're the same thing. They're an invisible force that is acting. And we let that invisible force do its acting while we hold on, and it creates a path where there was no path. And we walk that path. We have to make sure we do walk the path once we have to look for it and find it and use it. So again, we could ask, did it happen? And it's just an anecdote. Then it's just a story. Or we can take that story inside of ourselves. That's the lesson. That's the lesson there. I mean, it's an exciting thing to watch in a movie, but to really have it mean something, we internalize it. Now, I remember another story about some guy who walked on water. And guy's name was Jesus. And the way that I think I pictured it, and the way that I think most people picture it is, well, he's just walking. Here's the shore, and there's the water, and he just keeps walking on it. And there it is, just walking on the surface. But that's not the story. The story is much more to it. There are these fishermen in a boat, and they're fishing at night for reasons that I don't understand. But they're fishing at night, and a storm comes up. And by a storm, I don't mean, oh, there's a storm, it's raining. I mean a storm. I mean, there's the wind, there's the lightning, there's the thunder, there's the waves crashing all around them until they're afraid that the boat is going to capsize and they're all going to drown. That's what's going on there. That's what's happening. They are frightened, they're scared to death because they could very well die. And they see, off in the distance, their teacher walking on top of it. So what's he walking on? He's not taking a stroll on Golden Pond. He is walking on these waves that are crashing all around him. He has to navigate that and adjust, and it's a balancing act. But he's able to do it. And when he gets to the boat and his students there, he quiets the storm. He says, now cut it out. Stop that this instant, young man or young lady, whatever a storm is. He commands it, and it stops. That's the story. But again, what does it mean? What does it mean to us? How do we use it? Well, long before Sigmund Freud ever thought of the unconscious, people knew that in our minds, in our emotions, there's stuff that's going on below the surface. And that's what the sea generally represents, what's going on below the surface and above. So the storm is all the turmoil of the outside world pressing on us, knocking us around. The waves are our internal turmoil. That's a reaction and a response to it. That's what's going on with us, and we're afraid that we're going to capsize and drown. But if we have that spiritual knowledge that leads to a confidence and an assurance, we can walk on top of that. Yes, we have to balance, we have to adjust, but we walk on top of that because we have that confidence. And with that confidence, we can then calm first the waves that are an internal response, and then indeed deal with what's going on outside and calm the storm itself. So if you think of walking on water as just, well, wouldn't that be a cool thing to be able to do? That's what that story is. Hey, he's cool, he can walk on water. Then it's just an anecdote. Then it's just a story. But if we take it inside and apply that lesson in our lives, then it's a story worth listening to. Then it's a lesson that's worth learning. Now, for extra credit, as an exercise for the students, if you can make out how those last two stories are illustrations of two different applications of the same spiritual law, I will leave that as an exercise for the student. Now, there's another story that you see a lot, and this is a story about a hero or a god who will die and then gets better. This, of course, is a story of resurrection. This is the other story that Cheryl read for us today, the story of Easter. Now, how do we apply that? Again, if it's a story of something that happened long ago, I think in a religious science setting, religious science is about how we live our lives today, not about things that happened long ago. The stories are there to illustrate and to teach, as I say. So how do we apply it to ourselves? We apply it as a resurrection for ourselves. Now, I think most of you are familiar with or have heard of Jean Houston. Jean Houston wrote a number of books, but she actually wrote a few that are processes that you go through to retell a myth in your own life through these processes. And one of these is a book called Godseed, The Journey of Christ. And it has a number of processes throughout the entire story. I'm going to share with you a heavily edited version of the resurrection process, because it's just too long to share otherwise. But before I do, I'm going to share something else. Last week, Peggy Shin shared the idea of a one-word mantra. I'm going to share a zero-word mantra with you. And it goes like this. So let's do that together. And again. And with that, you can put your feet flat on the floor, close your eyes, and now begin to draw breath up. Not just breath, but extended breath, vital energy. Draw it up through the soles of your feet. Feel it coming up your legs, into your knees, along your spine, and then out through the very center of the top of your head. Feel the way you are held by Mother Earth. Feel the livingness, the vitality, the generosity of this earth. Allow your spine and your feet simply to appreciate being cradled in the womb of becoming. You are listening now with your spine, and voices that you do not often hear are speaking to you. You are feeling vibrations, music, rhythms that come to the very core of the planet from outside through cosmic space. Feel this cosmic pulsation like mighty quasars loaded with the music of the times. It comes quaking through you, implanting the higher genetic code, a higher being. Breathing, grounding, being nourished by the mother, by the energies of creation. Take in the vitalizing breath of existence, energy for each cell. Breathe not just oxygen, but the vital creative force made up of the magical transubstantiation of water and plants and minerals as they live in sunlight. The rays of the sun, the holy star, mix with the green of the earth. So as you breathe the beloveds, the sun and the earth. The great organizing principle of creation is being taken up into all your cells, each one. The deeper life principle is now moving through you. With every breath, you breathe in your connection to the cosmos. With every sensation, you imbibe the vibrations of cosmic space that go into your resurrection, into your recreation. You need only to be without doing. Listen and feel with your body. Now is the key moment of resurrection. Place your hands above the center of your chest. At that place, let your hands explore the love, the energy that is coming out of the cave of your chest. That cave is where you, as an initiate, lie dormant. It is the door to your resurrection. The heart cavity is opening, allowing you to flow into all and everything. Feel that flow with your hands. Let your hands speak to the center of your chest. Touch that energy, for you are touching the Holy Beloved. Know that this place in the chest is the cave of the long sleep, and you may have been asleep for many, many years. It is the cave of awakening, the resurrection from a life that has failed to really be, that has failed to perceive what is around it, and that has failed to live itself, the life that is now crucified and over. The beloved of the soul is lying there, inside, that which fashioned the universe from the tiniest ants to the farthest star, that which creates the seasons and all of life, that which creates the mysteries of the black holes, of the great nebulae, that which creates the coded genius that is there in the egg of a flea. All this lies within this cave, this tomb. It is loving you and yearning for communion with you. Let your hands begin to feel and appreciate what comes from inside. Let your chest appreciate the energy that comes from the hand. Lift your hand off the body a bit in a dialogue between the beloved and the lover, between the outside lover, which is the hand, and the inside lover, that is the chest and the heart. The hand and the heart can speak to each other in the wordless language of love. Hear the lovers sing to each other. You hear that everything around you is singing, that you are lying in the mother's arms, that the breath of life is streaming into you. Each cell and tissue and molecule and system and organ of you is reweaving a new life. The beloved is now giving you the empathy, the energy, the desire to be and to live as fully as you can and as you are. Beginning now, slowly move, open your eyes, and sit up. This is the resurrection. We move, we sit, we walk upon the earth. And so rise within yourself. Know that within the body of within you, the body of resurrection is there now, reconstituted. Feel yourself in communion with your beloved, so that you will not be separated from anyone or anything ever again. Roll away the stone now and see others as God, no longer in hiding. In religious science, we know that spiritual laws are timeless and independent of circumstance, independent of story. And we apply them to ourselves in our lives. Now, the traditional thing to say on Easter is, He is risen. But we apply that to ourselves and say, we are risen. We are risen from the depth of despair to the heights of hope. We are risen from the death that is fear and worry and anxiety to a life of confidence and assurance. We are risen from that cave of hesitation and waiting to a vitality of determination and accomplishment. We are risen from the tomb of depression and suffering to a new life of joy and happiness. We are risen, and so we are, and so it is.